All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in. I know these are very, very difficult days, and everybody is very busy, and we are at the same time, lots of things are closed, and there are less places to go to, and yet at the same time, we find that when we spend so much time looking at our phones and seeing all the various videos and comments coming in on the chat lists, it's really not just time consuming, it's self-consuming. So I want to obviously dedicate our learning to both the success of our Chayalim HaKadoshim, but also to the recovery of all those many, many, many people who are wounded. And I'm going to begin just by saying a Mishaberach for Tzahal. Mishaberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Hu Yivarech and Chaylei Tzva Hagana Yisrael v'Anshe Bitachon Haomdim al Mishmar Artzeinu Barei Eloheinu Migvul HaLebanon Vad Midbar Mitzrayim Umin Hayam HaGadol Ad Levo Arava B'Yabasha Ba'Avir Uvayam Yitein Adonai Toivenu Hakamim Aleinu Nigafim Lifnehem Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor V'Yatzil Et Chayleinu Mikol Tzara B'Tzukah Umikol Negu Machala Yishlach Bracha B'Atzlacha B'Chol Ma'aseh Dehem Yadbir Sonenu Taktehem V'Yatreim B'Chet Yeshua U'V'Teret Nitzachon V'Kayim Bahem HaKatuv Ki Adonai Elohechem Ha'olech Imachem Li'ilachem Lachem Imoivechem Lo She'edchem V'Nomar Amen. So I want to give some time. Everybody, I think, we're filled with emotions. So rather than go the full half hour, I want to talk for a bit, and then I want to give everybody time for whoever would like to kind of say a few words, get something off your chest, etc. I think it's very, very important to share feelings with what's going on today and not bottle it up inside, because it's psychologically much healthier when we can share among ourselves. So I want to talk, there's a lot of subjects to talk about in Bereisheit, but I want to discuss a little bit about the subject of evil, because what we have witnessed in this last continuing really, the last week, this is pure unadulterated evil. And the Torah does not shy away from the fact that evil exists. The Navi says that God created good and God created evil. And we see the events of Parshat Bereisheit represent and draw our attention to this malady of evil. We see it first, in a sense, with the Nachash, with the snake, really an evil character that is trying to lure Chava and, by extension, Adam into committing this sin, which will drive them out of Gan Eden. So the Nachash is characterized as a kind of the epitome of an evil symbol. We talked about the whole idea of looking up at the pole with the snake on top. Without getting into that, it's very fascinating. And everybody asks, well, why, if it's such an evil symbol, do we use it and stare at it and it heals you? In a sense, it's because when you confront the illness, that's how you deal with it. So without getting into that, we had a whole shiur on that at some point. But we see this beginning of time where already we have in place the concept of evil. And then we see it by Cain and Hevel. We talked last time, what were they fighting about? That, they divided the earth between them, and yet they were still greedy, and each one wanted what the other one had. One owned the real estate, the other one owned the movable objects, according to the Midrash. And so they fought among themselves until finally Cain kills Hevel. We'll come back to that. And then by the end of the Parsha, we are talking about such evil that God says, I have to do a reboot. I've got to destroy the world and start again, because people have become so evil. And so we kind of have to come to grips with this concept of evil in a world that is created by a perfect God, and it is something that's so terrible that God destroyed the entire world and all of humanity except for Noah and his family. And it doesn't seem to help even after that. We don't seem to have learned the lesson, which I'll get to in a moment. So when we look at some of these different sources, when Cain kills Hevel, God doesn't really have a comment about evil in the story of the snake, Chava, and Adam, but definitely does in the story of Cain and Hevel. So there, the pasuk says, and God is kind of giving a lecture. Vayomer Hashem el Cain, why are you looking the way you look? Why are you so annoyed, etc., after he performs this act? And he says, chatat rovetz, that lapete chatat rovetz, that sin crouches at the door. In other words, the propensity for sinning is always there. And im tetiv se'et, v'im lo tetiv, it's up to you whether or not you improve yourself and how you conduct yourself. Ve'elecha teshukato. It's always a desire, this lure and temptation of doing evil. But you can overcome it, says Hashem, atatim shalbo. So it's there. It's been put into humanity by God. Of course, the idea, as we know, the central idea between the existence of evil is to give people an opportunity to make a choice. We're not robots. So unless we have a choice between good and evil, then what do we accomplish if we choose good because there is no alternative? It's only the alternative that tests us, and we are living in a world of nisyonot, of trials that we're to see what we're made of and who we are. So this is what Hashem points out right in the beginning of time when he speaks to Cain. And then we go a little bit further in the 5th chapter, and there, and let me find it for a moment. Hang on. In the 6th chapter, in the 5th pasuk. So, Vayar Hashem ki ra'at ha'adam ba'aretz. God saw the wickedness, the evil of people on earth, b'chol yetzer machshavot libo, and everything they think about, all their thoughts were evil thoughts. Rak kol hayom, only bad all day long. Wow, that's quite a condemnation of what the world has become, that people were not just with the potential to sin, but this is what they occupied themselves with. And then we know by Yenachim Hashem, God kind of regrets that he created people, and he says, I'm going to destroy the world, me'adam ad behema, man, animal, etc. Ki nichamti ki asitim, I regret that I did it, this play on words with Noah. So things had reached such a stage that there was no alternative with this evil to destroy the world. And then we're going to look more at this pasuk in a moment. I'll come back to it. But in Parsha Noach, in the 8th parak, so the pasuk says that when Noah came off the teva, that he made a karban. Vayarach Hashem et reach hanichoach, that God, in a sense, smelled this pleasing aroma, and he says, I'm not going to curse the world the way I did. The first curse was really against Adam, that the earth wouldn't produce. It was very difficult. Now he says, no, you'll be able to produce. Indeed, Noah is credited with inventing farming tools. But then he says, Ki yetzer lev ha'adam raminu rav, that the inclination of a person is evil from his youth. Wow. So the world's been destroyed. The flood is over. Noah comes out for a new start, and guess what? Hashem repeats what he said before. that people are evil from the get-go. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but let me say a few things about the nature of the evil that we have witnessed. This is pure, unadulterated evil. The terrorists, and I would say really the Gazan population, if not the entire Palestinian population, they are people who, as the Torah said before, when Hashem was to destroy the world, this is what they think about. Kol yetzer machshavot libo. This is what they think about day and night. They think about perpetrating evil, and thoughts lead to action. There is no ands, ifs, or buts about this. The Torah tells us that such evil exists, and we know at least two examples of it. We know that there was an evil that we first really introduced on a communal level by Amalek. What was it about Amalek that was so evil? Their raison d'etre was not concerned about themselves, but the desire to attack and destroy the Jewish people. That is what they lived for. That was what was most important to them. And they demonstrate this by being suicidal. They're willing to kill themselves if they can kill Jews in the process. They're the first suicide bombers in history. And therefore, even though there were nations that oppressed us, only Amalek is chosen for genocide. Hashem tells us, have no mercy on them. They are cruel in the extreme, and their lifelong goal is to kill Jews, kill them first. And they must be wiped out, one and all. Men, women, children, soldiers, civilians, it doesn't matter. Now, we don't have a specific tribe today of Amalek. That tribe genealogically does not exist. But we have what's called Zer Amalek, the seed of Amalek. Those who we know are from that same, cut from that same cloth, that their whole desire is to kill Jews. And of course, we see this is true about the terrorists of Gaza and about the majority of, I won't say all the Palestinians, but certainly anyone who supports what they've done. And we see this happening. And by the way, it's not just Palestinians, it's not just Muslims. You see a comment by Black Lives Matter saying that, well, this is what happens when you oppress a people, so it's justified. I mean, this is not necessarily Amalek. This is more ignorance of the blacks than anything else. But it lends itself and aligns itself with Amalek. We fought Amalek and we could not eradicate Amalek. Yeshua is given that task. The pasuk says he weakened, he weakened Amalek, but he was not able to completely destroy them. And the pasuk says, Ki yad al kesiyah, their hand will always be on the throne of God, meaning their hands will be against those who are God's chosen people, the Jewish people, forever. And therefore we must remember that, and we must steel ourselves. We are b'nei rachamim, we are merciful people, and nevertheless, we understand that we have to do what it takes to get rid of them. Unfortunately, in an evil world, and we live in a world that is largely, or is at least in many ways evil, that finds excuses for evil and basically turns the victim into the victimizer. We have a similar example about the Nazis. They were also, this was their raison d'etre, this was their primary goal, not so much world domination or winning the wars, but killing the Jews. Whenever there was a choice between sending troops on a train to help in a battle or taking the Jews on a train to the death camp, the order from Hitler was, take them to the death camp. That's the most important thing for me, even if the battle will fail. They were also somewhat suicidal in that respect, but not completely. In truth, the terrorists of Gaza are worse than the Nazis, because the Nazis tried to hide what they did. They tried to disguise the death camps. They lied about it. And after the war, They try to plead innocence, to run away, even to disguise themselves as Jews. But the terrorists of Gaza, they're quite proud of it. They proclaim it. They make videos about it, and they try to show the world we're very, very proud of killing as many Jews in as cruel and atrocious and barbaric a fashion as possible. So in many ways, they are worse than the Nazis. We should do to them what we did to the Nazis. There was an absolute wall-to-wall Western, not all the countries against them, but once we made war, it was total war. And that was our concern. We firebombed Dresden. The accomplices of the Nazis, the Japanese, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on. We did not have mercy on them. There was no such thing as mercy on the German people, but only against the Nazis. This is a nation that declared war on us, and we had to, there's no such thing as collateral damage. Everyone is guilty. When a nation fights a nation, you don't pick and choose between members of that nation. You have an all-out war, and everything is devoted to that war. And that's essentially what has to happen here. There has to be an all-out war, and we hope that the IDF will be able to launch its war, and it will not be held back by anyone. Ignore the world opinion, and hopefully there will not be pressure from our allies on quote-unquote humanitarian basis. These are not humans. Amalek, the Nazis, these were subhuman people, and they do not deserve to be given any mercy whatsoever. And I'm glad that we are currently denying them food, water, electricity, etc. That should continue for a long, long time. And in spite of what the evil world will unfortunately try to mount pressure against us on. I want to add one thing, and as I said, I wanted to give a few minutes. This idea of after the world is destroyed in next week's Parsha, and God comes back and still says, Lev Adam Rami Nurav, that the heart of people is evil from its youth. I mean, what did he accomplish? God destroyed the world, and it should have been a better world. He doesn't destroy it again. He promises I won't. But maybe in a sense, if you can say this, even God maybe was somewhat surprised by the fact that even after the world had been destroyed, nevertheless, and maybe this is, of course, people heard about this as they grew up, it didn't stop them from being evil either. And God maybe throws up his hands, so to speak, and says, well, I just got to live with this. Let me read you a comment, however, about this very strange pasuk. The Medrash tells us God smelled the fragrance of those who in the future would dedicate themselves to their divine mission, even to the point of self-sacrifice. People like Abraham, who was thrown into the fiery furnace when he would not worship an idol, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, also, and if you know that story, and of course, all the Jews that come in history from Abraham on, living under conditions of intolerable persecution, but nevertheless remaining passionately devoted to our divine mission. And in many ways, I would say we are more credited than Abraham's generation, because we are showing this Mesirat Nefesh, the self-sacrifice, following a very lengthy exile with all kinds of horrific persecutions of the pogroms and the Inquisition and you name it, and of course the Shoah. So this generation can ask, how is it possible we've already suffered? What we've suffered through is not enough. Why do we have to continually be confronted by this intense spiritual darkness and evil? We've witnessed so many horrific occurrences that cannot be explained in any way. We see that even those who fulfilled Hashem's commandments, who should certainly have been given protection, have unfortunately also met with terrible fates. And yet, despite God's nearly total concealment, many of this generation remain unfalteringly committed to their divine mission. And talk about our holy soldiers who, you know, they're not scared. They're ready to go, and they're eager to go to do what they need to do for revenge. Moshe looks into the generations of the future. He sees our generation, says the Medrash, and he is humbled himself. Wow. And it was indeed the sweet fragrance of these individuals from our generation that inspired God to promise that day and night would never again cease. When God saw those who would continue to engage in their spiritual work with Mesirat Nefesh, self-sacrifice, and unabated enthusiasm, and their commitment would be unchanging, he endowed nature with the same stability so that the world functioned. But let me add this phrase that is very confusing: man is evil from his youth. This was what we said before as an argument why human beings should be destroyed. Now we're saying this is why human beings should not be destroyed. It doesn't make sense. So the explanation of this seeming contradiction is this: Noah's offerings caused the same argument, calling for God's use of his attribute of strict judgment, to now dictate using it in respect to his aspect of kindness and mercy. Though our inclination is evil, we can overcome it, and if we do, we'll be rewarded. And in a sense, we're turning it around and saying, in spite of the fact that there's evil, when we are not evil and we follow the ways of Hashem and we lead a moral life, God is absolutely committed to maintaining our lives, our national life, certainly, because of what we've done. When we sacrifice ourselves by foregoing our own desires in favor of God's will, when we want to remain Jewish, even in spite of the fact that there is danger and people threaten us, we merit to receive the same kind of treatment from God. And evidence that normally would be used against us is used in our favor. So he repeats this phrase in order to say, yes, people still are evil, but while I promise to destroy the previous world because of that evil, for you who engage in Mesirat Nefesh and remain faithful to God, I will also promise to maintain your national life. So the Jewish people will never be destroyed. And that is the commitment that we have. That is the promise that we have from Hashem, that yes, there is evil. And yes, we must fight against that evil. And we are going to suffer in the process, unfortunately. And we saw that in terrible fashion this past week. And we may see it again when the ground troops go in, unfortunately. Good people will be harmed. We hope not. It's possible to do it without being harmed, we hope. But at the end of the day, that is exactly what Hashem recognizes. You fought evil, and therefore your national life as the Jewish people, instead of it being destroyed like the world was, it will be eternally maintained, and you will exist until the end of time, till Moshiach comes, and that will hopefully cure and eradicate the evil from this world. B'mher v'yameinu, amen. So I want to stop for give a few minutes if anybody wants to make a comment, very briefly, please, and or express something you want to express. So I'm going to ask Yossi, our intrepid host, that he will allow anyone to unmute yourself if you want to. I will mention that I'll keep you posted, but we may not have class for the next couple of weeks. But I'll keep you appraised of that. It's still, I'm not 100% sure what will be, but stay tuned. So if anybody wants to say something and contribute, unmute yourself and feel free to say a word or two. Anybody like to offer a thought? You don't have to. It's okay. Yes, Esty. Can you unmute yourself? Are you unmuted?
I think so. I think so. Can you hear me?
Maybe turn your sound on. I don't hear you.
It's on. Hello? Can you hear me?
No, I don't hear you. Yeah.
We can hear you. Yes, we hear you. We can hear
David,
you.
if somebody else want to say something, go ahead. Just unmute yourself.
We all
You have to turn up your volume, otherwise you cannot
Maybe
hear.
there's something wrong
Esty, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm just gonna. Okay, good. I just want to say.
Okay, for some reason I'm not hearing you.
Happening. In the last.
I hear you. I see you speaking, Esty, but unfortunately, I don't hear you. I don't know. Maybe are you on? You want to fix your sound for a minute?
I don't know how to do it. I don't know what.
It's your sound.
Okay. Philip,
Maybe
you're
your
talking
sound.
also, but I
Because
will
everybody
for
can
some
hear me.
reason. I'll ask
1
Yossi
minute,
if he
everybody.
can.
It's
fix
Stuart.
that.
Stuart, you have to turn on your
Yossi,
volume.
can you hear me? Can you speak?
Yes,
Oh,
you
I'm
have
sorry.
to turn
I'm sorry.
on your
Wait a minute. I
volume.
think that's more me. Okay, hold on.
Yes,
Okay,
it
let
is
me fix it.
you.
Okay, it's me. I'm sorry. Leslie, you go ahead. You were first.
Well, this whole year of division between our people, and then what happened on Yom Kippur in Dizengoff Center and other communities around Israel. I hear it from other people, also from my sister's community, also that people came in and disrupted the services. And I think, is this a divine? I mean, is this a divine punishment?
Well, everybody asked that question. There's none of us are Nevi'im. People can, of course, conjecture, and a lot of people, maybe everybody here has said something like that. But certainly unity is something very important, and everybody would agree. That's for sure. But whether something happens, connecting the dots is a very difficult endeavor because we are not God. And we don't know. Some people would say, why do we ever deserve divine all the miracles that we've had? So, the calculations are up to Hashem, but obviously being united as we are today in this cause of eradicating the evil of the terrorism of the Palestinians, this certainly is a good thing. Yes. Who else would like to say something now that I can hear you? Anyone else? Okay, I guess Esty, you're the only brave one out there. But
I was going to say something.
Please do.
So I wanted to ask you if it surprised you. I noticed that at President Herzog's news conference today, yes, everybody's horrified by the pictures and what happened, but at the same time, the tenor of the questions was basically, well, it's going to be just like the other previous times, business as usual. And obviously, President Herzog was exasperated by that position, but that seemed to be the clear message by the reporters or journalists. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't surprise me because we have followed this pattern before. We had several years ago, where we also bombed Gaza to smithereens, and then there was a time, that there was some peace and quiet. And I don't know. It's very difficult to arrive at some kind of a permanent solution. Even in Tanakh, when we fight and defeat our enemies, it says, and there was quiet in the land for 40 years. We would love to have 40 years, even 4 years. Obviously, there is an intent to do what it takes so that we can eradicate this problem. But that's easier said than done, because I don't know that we're prepared to kill 2 million people. And I don't know that we're prepared to go back and control Gaza. And so there are not a lot of really good alternatives. And what often it breaks down to is punishing them to the extent that they say, and hopefully some pressure from their own people, so that they can avoid doing this in the near future, so they don't have to go through this again. Nobody really likes to suffer. The terrorists, they're happy, and many of them, to die in the cause. But I think that doesn't speak necessarily for the majority. A lot of them are talk, but don't really mean it. Most people want to have a life. And the hope is that it'll reach a point where they say, we don't want to go through this again. But smarter people than you and I don't know about that. Smarter people than me are working on this to try to come up with some kind of a solution to it, and some kind of a lasting situation. And we'll see if that happens. But I think first there has to be a very, very, very strong punishment for what was done. And as I wrote in an article, revenge is a Jewish idea. It's a Jewish virtue. Nothing wrong with revenge. We say it in the Wednesday morning Psalm of the day, and we talk about wars of revenge, and that's okay. Yes, David Barrett, maybe you'll make the last comment. Go ahead. Are you there, David? You unmute yourself, David. Let's hear what you have to say. but you're muted. You're muted, David. You have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Okay,
go ahead.
thank you. The last week I've been running around the whole of the Hasharon area, from in Ra'anana, Herzliya, Telmon. The one thing that is now very, very evident is that the war has created some form of direct unity, and the chesed that I have seen in all the places I have been visiting is quite amazing. We have matnasim, B'tei Avot, hosting people who have come from the south. They are being fed, they are being clothed. The food is pouring in. That's why there's no food on the shelves in the supermarkets. And it's not only just prayers, it's the actual physical acts that are going on, which I hope will bear witness to a continuation of this unity.
Yes, very good. Let's just hope that this spirit of togetherness will carry over not only through the fighting, but in the way we deal with each other on a daily basis in every aspect of life. So everybody have a wonderful Shabbat, and let's pray for, keep davening and do everything we can do. Plenty of opportunities out there for volunteerism and to show this unity in every single home. And we hopefully will be victorious, and we'll reach a point of peace. And everybody should stay safe, stay healthy. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next time, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you for tuning in.
Toda Rabba.
Thank you, Rabbi.